bar.
That extra gear, the first 3 steps.
Huge strides in the performance.
That I might not be the player I am today.
All right, welcome to another episode of Behind the Gear. And today we got Wade Russell and Kev Galerno back on and just kind of talking, obviously 2 skills coaches that are in the trenches on a daily, basically with young kids all the way up to kind of juniors and pros. And obviously we've had a chance to be on the ice quite a bit together, the 3 of us. But I guess one thing that the reason I like having you guys on and talking about a bunch of this kind of stuff is because there's a lot of things popping off right now through the time we're going through as far as the pandemic and how minor hockey is being dealt with and how players are being dealt with right now. And there's a lot of different things going on. I kind of want to touch on a couple different things, but I guess first off, I should say, I should ask you, how are you doing?
I'm good.
All right, okay,
That's
good.
it. Yeah,
And,
next guy.
I mean,
I'm doing good.
I'm not doing anything, so I'm quite good.
got a lot of time, eh?
Yep.
But just, I mean, you guys got more than that going on. Kevy, you got a little, your little guys, how many months now?
He's almost 5.
5 months.
Almost 5. Yeah.
Crazy.
So it's crazy. I'm getting smarter every time I get on this thing. I think I say that every time, but
Yeah.
I'm smarter and smarter.
Yeah. Better at parenting.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Get
Becoming somewhat of an expert, right? Once you have a kid, you're basically,
you know everything.
yeah, and you can really give it to other parents because you're a parent now. So it's perfect.
Every baby I see in a stroller, I'm like, they're cold, they're hot, they're not doing it right.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's been good.
And Wade, you got obviously school going on with your masters and stuff. And how's that been going?
Good. Last paper in tonight. So once we're done this, I'll head home, finish that up, polish it off, and send it in. And then I got a month off, which is great.
That's good.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do for your month off?
Well, I have a bunch of things that I've written down that I'm going to do. How many I tick off by the end of Christmas, I'm not too sure.
Okay.
Write them down. Now you're just
setting.
semi-tied to
Yeah.
Sports site, goal setting.
There you
Smart
go.
goals.
You're locked in. Locked in.
How about you? What have you been up to?
Built an outdoor rink. Put an outdoor rink in the backyard. I don't think it's gonna be cold enough this winter to freeze it, so I've got a pool in my backyard, a 2-inch, 3-inch pool. Yeah, I did that first time I ever actually built an outdoor rink. Being from Sudbury, we took it for granted because you had dads that would put together the outdoor rinks, or you'd have lakes you'd shovel off, which is easy. But yeah, first time I'd ever done that, or first time I've done it in the backyard. But yeah, I'm excited. Just more. I did. Only reason why I did it was more of an activity, just because of what we're going through. There's not a lot of stuff planned, or can't visit family or do anything like that. So we'll be probably staying put for most of the winter. So I figured a little activity for afternoons, weekends, whatever, for the kids and for my buddies when they come over at night. We'll get the lights going and a little 2-on-2.
I like it.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's about it. And then obviously everything
Actually,
else.
I think you said this. We'll actually just sit there and watch it. The moderately frozen water sitting there with leaves in it.
Yeah, exactly. It's gonna be a mess. But yeah, we'll see how that all plays out. But going back to kind of what I started with minor hockey, what are some of the things that you guys are noticing right now? Because through this whole pandemic, I feel like obviously rules have changed in and out, and I think everywhere, kind of depending on what country you're in, I think everyone's gone through some changes at the ice rink or with your minor hockey association and numbers on the ice and ice times and all that kind of stuff. One thing that I've noticed is for a lot of the age groups, the kids are on the ice more this year than they have in the past. And I don't know if that's kind of what you guys see as well, but especially the more elite kids. And I'm talking like 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, 11, 12. Like they're on the ice 4, 5, 6 days a week. And I don't know if it's because there's not as much going on for the parents and the parents just have a little bit more time to bring them around, or if I don't know exactly what it is, but man, it seems like it's a lot. I don't know if you noticed that at all, Kev. But
I agree, yeah, and I don't think that's wrong either. Like parents, like I have more. Do you know what I mean? I don't think that's a wrong reason to be like, oh, I'm gonna fill up more of my kids' time with things that are allowed. I think that's okay, unless it's like you're dragging your kids, which we were talking about all the time. There's some kids that are dying to get on the ice 5 times, which is okay, and there's others that we're working with that are like, they're just out here going through the motions because this is the 5th session. We're at Friday. This is the 5th session this week, or 4th session, and they have one Saturday and one Sunday still. Like they're,
Yeah.
So I think there's a fine line there, but I agree. I think kids are on lots, and maybe it's similar. When you put in games or you add tournaments, and it all come out in the wash in terms of like playing some tournaments and playing 5-6 games in a weekend. But I think because they're doing very similar things, they're practicing, they're scrimmaging against their team, and they're doing skill stuff, whatever you want to call it. There's no actual games in there. I think that it's seeming like even more than normal, just because it's a lot of the, and I don't mean same stuff in terms of like same skills, just like you go out there and you just, whatever the coach says, you're just doing it, and
Yeah.
it's different than normal. But yeah, I would agree with you. I think there's more and more kids that you're like, they're on a lot. Now, some of them are looking great at young ages, like you said, and they're it's awesome, but it's a fine line. And I also think like for coaches, not so much for kids that are jumping around to like maybe 2 or 3 different like skill guys or whatever. That's one thing. But also for some of these coaches, I think it's really getting to a point that's like, whoa, this is getting long. Like, what are we doing? Even like talking to some of these coaches, they're like, at first it was like, let's just make it simple, picking up past other feet, skating, whatever. And now it's like, hey, let's do breakouts. Like, well, maybe I think they want to revert to that because that's what they're comfortable with. Normally that's what you do. You just adapt from what didn't go well on last weekend's games. And you're like, hey, that's what we're going to do at practice this week. So it's a lot easier, I think, for some of these coaches to just say, this is what we're doing this week because we didn't do it very well on the weekend. And now there's like, maybe whether you're setting up a plan or it's just getting a little bit long because you have to keep finding game situation stuff hopefully without just doing breakouts and, attack triangles all the time.
Yeah.
So I think it's getting long for the kids and for the coaches.
Yeah, definitely. Wade, what are you seeing? Kind of the same thing, or?
Yeah, it's. I do think it's a lot. Like probably the highest frequency of like any skater that we kind of come across being on the ice so much. So one thing I've tried to be a little kind of more considerate of is, I feel like just because of COVID and everything that it's kind of caused and trickle down in all the different areas, like they're getting, I think, so much information, so condensed, and it's like so structured for them. Because if you think about teachers, they're obviously pressed, usually a lot of Zoom calls for them. They're in class. I feel like as a teacher, when you have a full week, it's okay to be like, oh, we're not going to get this today. We'll do it tomorrow. Well, with all the restrictions and all the cohorts and everything, they're just getting kind of pumped this information. Then they show up to the rink of one of their 4 skills coach skates that week, and they're getting pumped this information. And then Wednesday, and then so I've tried to be a little bit more conversational with them, a little bit less like, hey, do this, don't do this, but more just, hey, what did you think of there on that rep? How did that one feel? Like just kind of leaving it a little bit more in their court to kind of play with it a little bit more. I do think there's more acceptance now. Like they know like this is just the reality as it is. Whereas at the beginning, it was kind of like bright eye, like kind of deer in the headlights. What's going on? Like they were scared to make mistakes with the rules and the protocols. Whereas now this is what it is. It's going to be skill stuff. I think it helps that they're getting a little bit of games now. It's not great. It's certainly not ideal, but they're starting to do inter-squad scrimmages and different things like that. I was at Stronach on Sunday, and it was actually, I don't know if they do this normally, but North London had an inter-squad game, and they were playing music for the kids, and they're getting all pumped up to AC/DC. So I thought that was cool to kind of make probably a less than ideal situation at least a little more fun and engaging. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting time to be in. Like normally kids are excited right now. They're in their seasons. They've just played maybe their first or second tournament, but right now it's just kind of flat. So I'm trying to be very cognizant of that with not overburdening them with just, hey, do this a million times and stuff. So it's an interesting time to be in, definitely. Yeah, and I think you bring up something that's really important is just keeping it fun, right? And for some of the coaches, I get it. Like it is long and you're only practicing. And I know here if you have more than 12 kids on the ice, you can't all be together. You got to split up the rink. You got to, so now you need 2 or 3 or 4 coaches on the ice, hopefully. And now you're running small half ice basically practices with a midget team or, 16, 17-year-olds, sometimes the junior team, same thing. So that makes it difficult, and it makes it a lot harder on the coaches just coming up with different ideas and different things for a totally different structured practice, which is awkward, obviously, in itself. But so I do feel for them. I think it is kind of long. But to your point, like keeping it fun, why not throw, like you hear about NHL teams. I know last year Hershey did this a little bit. The guys would basically, by playing well on a weekend or whatever it was, they'd be able to have practice or music at practice on one of the days, and they'd be pumping tunes through the whole practice. And guys loved it. Like it was fun. They were in, it was good. But just adding some different things like that kind of keep it fun, keep it, a little bit more motivating for the kids and a little bit different, right? But I also think this is a really good opportunity for players to get better, and if you're coaching a team and maybe they're young players and they're not good at, at skating or puck handling or whatever that is, or different players aren't good at certain things. I mean, it's an unreal opportunity right now to get those players better and get them up to speed a little bit during your practice time. And not that you have to sit them in the corner the whole time and work on side stops, but you can really get a lot of reps in and really work with a lot of the kids on their weaknesses right now. The other thing too that I feel is a bit of a miss is the associations. I don't feel like the associations have done a great job overall at giving their coaches support, bringing maybe some outside help in to help the association or help the coaches. You know what I mean? It's just kind of business as usual. Please don't bug us. Here's your allotted ice times and make sure you wear a mask. Like that was the biggest thing when coaches had to start wearing masks. So if anyone's not aware, in Ontario anyway, or maybe just in London, is it? Yeah, it's zones.
Yeah.
Just
so we have to wear like a mask on the ice to coach, which is the worst thing ever. I understand masks and I appreciate masks. Don't get me wrong, but on the ice, it's hard. Like you're sweating, things wet, soaking wet. You're trying to talk. Kids can't hear you. It's
trying to blow a whistle.
Yeah, right. So there's so many. Yeah. But now you add that layer to it, then that's tough. But I think associations, like I know at the beginning when the masks first came out, there was like 4 or 5 people from each association out watching their team practices and basically snitch lines and people telling on coaches and all about masks, but no one cared that they ran the same drill 17 practices in a row. That was fine, so I think there's a lot of that going on too, where it would have been better if it would have been nice if the associations kind of got a bit of a handle on it to start and helped out, help these coaches out a little bit more and give them some more resources to be able to run efficient practices and things like that and kind of hit on some different stuff.
And you could say that, I think, about a lot of associations any year where there wasn't just enough and more. There is more and more of like, whether it's like a coach mentor or whatever, there's more and more that not in enough places. So I think you could say exactly what you're saying in a lot of years or every year, but just seems even more evident, like kind of more obvious almost this year. Yeah. Because there's, because that trigger word, like development year, development season, I think it's really obvious this year.
Yeah. So. No, I totally agree. And then I know like situations like at Western, so like university hockey got canceled across Canada, which is, brutal obviously for those players and stuff like that. But I know Western's done a pretty good job so far of just getting the guys back on the ice, getting them, and the girls as well, the men's and women's team both. But trying to keep it light, trying to keep it fun, just giving them an activity, aside from school and workouts and things like that. How's that been going overall, Wado, as far as the the guys and the reception from them?
It's been good. Like it's my first time with the program, so it's hard for me to kind of have a baseline or like a litmus test for how they normally are when things are normal. Clark you had on recently, who I'm sure everybody kind of got to listen to. Like he runs a really good program. Like he's very thoughtful with his approach, top down. He encompasses kind of all the elements of performance to just kind of personal relationship skills, things like that. So I think the buy-in's been really good. Like I think it has been tough. Like they were in the semifinal of the national championship last year when COVID ended their season. Then they're obviously destroyed by that, and the opportunity came so close as a group. And then, you start to reload and you're thinking maybe, hey, we're going to get a season in, and then plug gets pulled again. So for a lot of those fifth year guys, they not only did they see their opportunity in the rearview mirror, then they don't even get another shot at it. So that was kind of, I think, one of the hardest parts, especially when the news came out. But credit to those guys, like they've bought in and they understand their role as being those fifth year guys who aren't even going to get to probably play a game this year unless we work out some kind of exhibition. But they're kind of setting the standard for those first year guys coming in, which is really crucial, I think, especially because things aren't normal. And it's easy to probably get away with being a little bit lazier in practice or not being as committed to your scheduling and things like that. But those guys show up, they kind of set the tone, even though there's nothing to play for. And that hopefully if we get out of this here in the next year, that can set the tone for that next wave of recruits coming in, because they're already talking about recruiting again for next year. So there's going to be this whole wave of players coming in. It's going to be quite a new roster, because you have 2 years of rookies that haven't even played a game in that league yet. So I think that's been really important. And I think credit goes to those veteran guys that have kind of embraced that. Some of them have jobs already and they got a lot of stuff lined up, but they're still showing up to the rink and kind of putting the work to kind of send that message to the younger guys. So it's been, I think, as good as it can be from my limited experience at that level.
Yeah. No, and I think, one thing, Clark has done such a good job with that program over a long term. And it's not an easy job to have because, the OHL, you got motivation from the NHL for a lot of these players. They want to get drafted in the NHL. They want to go play pro. So there's a big carrot dangle there. Whereas when you go to, university hockey, a lot of times, especially in Canada, it's a really good league. The pace of hockey is unreal. But a lot of those players want to go on to work or want to go do post-grad. They want to become teachers, whatever that is. You just still do have a lot of players that do want to go on and play, but you've got different motivations for different players. So as a coach, it's hard to, keep everyone driven. And it's such a key thing to have real good veterans, especially in that type of environment, right? Because that does set your culture, your team for the next year and the following year and the following year. And, if you have vets, we've talked about this on a bunch of different podcasts, but if you have vets that treat the young guys right and treat the rookies right and the second year guys right, and then hopefully those players will be that type of vet when they're in their fourth year and fifth year, and that's, to me, that starts with management and coaches and how they respect the players and how they treat the players. And then that kind of trickles down, you know what I mean? And I think they've done a really good job there, obviously, but for any team right now, even as, a minor hockey team or whatever that is, I think there's still a good opportunity right now to teach leadership, to teach team culture, to teach all that kind of stuff aside from just practices. You know what I mean? I know it's hard to get together, go for dinners, things like that, but you're at the rink, you know what I mean? You can do stuff on the ice, you can do stuff in the locker room, you can do different things where you can kind of bring guys together and girls together and kind of keep building that culture, you know what I mean? What were some of the tightest teams that you guys played on? So Kev, if you think back kind of minor hockey through college and pro, were there any teams that stand out to you that were pretty tight?
Like as a kind of off the ice, on the ice,
Yeah,
everything.
just-
I only asked that because there's different ways you can look at it. Right away when you said that, I actually, my mind didn't go there. I went to like coaches, like which coach was like ran the tightest ship.
Yeah.
And when I thought of it that way, first, it's not the same teams that I would have said have the tightest group of guys. You know what I mean? Like and then just in this like 30 seconds thinking about it, I'm thinking of why, and we had no freedom. Like no freedom.
Too tight.
Yeah, it was too tight. Everything, even the on ice stuff was like so much systems and so much. There was just nothing was like up to us.
Right.
Every situation on the ice, everywhere we went, every play, every face off, every zone, every entry, every break, it was like dialed, you know. And then I think there's some other ones where the coaches did a good job of like letting the boys be boys, letting the guys play, you know, getting a feel for each other. And when I think a team that comes to mind is one of my last years as a junior, which is always a pretty fun time for, I'm sure you guys feel the same, like pretty fun time for players, right? You don't have your last year as a junior when you haven't like hit real life yet. You just get to
I'm still playing right now.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, like I think to one of those and the guys having a pretty good group, but I even think to some little things, like I had some good veterans when I was coming up starting junior that I learned this from, and I had a year that didn't have this. And I remember getting older and being like, we had some young guys, and like just because we were young enough to do some of the things, we were old enough to do some things at the end of our junior career that some of the guys weren't, didn't mean we always did them. Like we would hang out with those guys, like do things that we could all do, whether it was like bowling on the weekends.
Yeah,
or
instead of you guys going to the bar.
Yeah,
and
100%. That, and I think that made a really big difference. I would hope it did. I remember being on teams when I was younger that didn't have that, you know, when I started out playing junior, and then another junior team that did have that. And I remember the difference being like, I feel so much more included as a young guy. And then I made sure that when, you know, myself and some of the other players were like the leadership group, we did that. And that's what sticks out to me as like one of the most fun teams. Now it helped that we were pretty good and we won a lot of games, you know, and that definitely helped. Winning always helps.
For sure.
Well, it doesn't always help, but it certainly doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
So that helps for sure too. But I just think like if I would have taken a different coach and put them in that situation, and if they would have controlled too much, whether it was on the ice and off the ice, then it may have not been the same.
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. What about you, Ado?
Yeah, so I kind of want to touch on two things there. The team that I think I was kind of tightest with was, I didn't have an illustrious long career, but it was in our major midget year in my first year under Chuck Dufton. Kind of going back to what Kevy said. So for those kind of listening at home, like with having some choice and what Kevy's talking about, it's called kind of like autonomy and having some kind of say in your actions and what you're able to do. So for coaches kind of listening or parents or whatever, it can be a little bit larger scale. Like, hey, what do you want to work on at practice? And giving them, most kids are going to say shooting, passing, stick handling. Yeah. You already had those things in your drills, but it gives them a little bit of a feel like they had their development in their hands. It's going to increase ownership of their skills. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. It can be also just smaller. Like if they do a rep through a drill that was wrong, in your opinion, instead of just being, hey, that was wrong, do this, say, what do you think you could have done differently there? And then have a bit of a conversation with them and kind of steer them to the answer that you probably would have given outright. But again, it gives that athlete or that player, that participant, a little bit more involvement, and they feel like they're learning not just because they're being told what to do, but they're also kind of coming up with some of the decisions and things behind it. So I agree that that's huge in team cultures, but it's a fine line. Like you give too much rope and things go the wrong way. But I wanted to go back quickly. You mentioned kind of having those veterans and things like that. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds, they don't have veterans on a team, right? They just have their team. But I think it goes back to the larger kind of picture of like, we kind of just assume that life skills transfer from sport to life. And I think they do, but it's who you're around and how it's being modeled. Like if you were completely different as a kid, I would have turned out as probably a different athlete. Like if you were lazy and you didn't show up and have the ice ready and you didn't have pucks out there and you weren't, doing and eating right and doing all these different things right, like there's no way I would have bought into what you were saying just as much. But I'm like, I can't look at you and say, like he's not doing it. Like he lives it, he does it, like he breathes it. So it's, what he's talking about must be true. So kind of going back to coaches again, like it's important that, it's great if you're teaching like right now to be resilient. Like I think it's a good time to teach kids to be resilient. We all like to think of that kid that's going to grow up and play. there's going to be a black ace on a team where they're not playing for 5, 7, 10 games at a time. Like I know this is way more extreme and I don't want to downplay kind of the severity of the situation, but it is a good time to just teach them. Like, I know you're not playing right now, but it's keep working on your skills. So like, if you're teaching those things, though, you got to be modeling it is kind of what I wanted to come back to. Like, it's great if you're saying all that stuff, but then if you're not being resilient and you're kicking and screaming about the rules and the regulations, that kid they're not going to learn resilience from that. Just being in sport doesn't happen. You have to model it. You have to kind of be showing those things, whether you're a parent, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a coach, whether you're a parent and it's, the team's over at your house and 7 of those kids aren't even yours, but you still need to ideally be modeling those behaviors. So I think going back to the reason I enjoyed that major midget years, we had autonomy. Everybody around me was modeling all the same behaviors and it was just easy to buy into everything. There was no mixed messaging. There was no, yeah, but they or whatever. It was super easy to follow, but I felt like I had ownership in it because I was given some choice. But at the same time, everybody around me was doing the things that they said to do and were doing. So,
yeah, no, I think those are great points, and I think you're right. Like, even for parents or coaches, how you come to the rink, how you are on the ice. I was thinking about this when I was on the ice this morning. The energy level that you bring, even as a coach, to practice changes practice, right? I remember years ago now, I was watching Pittsburgh Penguins practice, and this was back when Bilesma was the coach there, and they were running a pregame skate in Columbus. So, I mean, whatever, right? And Pittsburgh was good. Columbus was okay. But the energy in that pregame skate was unbelievable. They were hooting and hollering. Coaches were jumping in the drills, like adding pressure on certain things. It was a pregame skate, like 15, 20 minutes. Crosby was out there. Malcolm, the whole group was out there. Like, but I was like, man, this is awesome. And the energy level was crazy. But that just changed everything just because of the way those coaches were. So even us as, working with minor hockey players or any coach that's out there, that energy is huge. And I also think it's really important for parents to like be mindful of what you're saying around your kids. So what you're saying right now, like, this COVID sucks. It's we can't play games. This is a crock. And the more the kids hear that, like, I don't know why a kid comes to practice at 8 years old and say, I hate practice. You love hockey, but you hate practice. Well, guess what, bud? Like, you're going to be practicing way more than you're going to be playing games your entire life. So learn to like practice. Well, where does that come from a lot of times, right? Talk to the parent, I love watching the games. Like, practice sucks, coach sucks. Well, now all of a sudden this 8-year-old doesn't like the coach because all he's been hearing for the whole drive to the rink and home for the last 3 months is how much the coach is an idiot and the coach doesn't know what he's doing. Practice sucks, right? Well, it's not fair, right? Like, let that kid make up their own mind about what it's like. And maybe you don't like the coach. Maybe you don't like maybe the coach is not doing a good job, but then go coach, then become a coach, right? Like, why are you shredding this coach, And so I think that's really important. Like, and I'm not saying again that we do this right or wrong, but there's been a lot of times where we come home, like I'll take let's say my daughter to a game or whatever, and they'll come home and they'll tell my wife how they played. My wife will ask, hey, how'd you play? And I played good, whatever. And then after they have that conversation, when my wife and I are alone, then I'll tell her how she really played or vice versa, right? And that's just between us. Like, they're 7, 8, 6 years. Who cares? Like, I don't care as long as they work hard, as long as they enjoy going to the rink and they work hard, that's it, right? So I think, they don't need to hear, some of that stuff. And I'll share a story in a little bit about kind of one of my dumb dad moments with hockey. But it's really hard, right? Because you want what's best for your kids. You want your kids to do well. Or even as a coach, you want your team to do well. You almost take it on the chin when they're not doing well or they play bad or the team plays bad. So I understand the emotional part of it, but we got to play a big leadership role as a coach or as a parent, and I think sometimes we forget it. And it is important to model that, kind of model that behavior that on how you want those players to act or behave. You try to do that as much as you can. You know what I mean? And I think it's also hard to fake it, right? You can fake for a little bit, but I think a lot of times players see right through that, and I think it's so important, man, because you play such a big role, whether you're a skills coach or a head coach or a parent or whatever that is. It's, they're always looking at you. So I think it's a big role to play for sure. No pressure.
Yeah. And you asked originally about like teams, right? So take that to like the next level. Well, if you have a guy that's a kid that's a bad teammate, he's a bad kid or just a teammate, or he's not happy when somebody else does something good or whatever, does that end up having an effect on those teams that are really tight knit when they're playing junior at 17, 18, 19 and then college or pro? Like, I think it does. Like, if you have 2 or 3 of those bad kids on a team, there's a good chance that team isn't going to be the one you asked us about 5 minutes ago. That's like pretty close and tight knit. You know what I mean? Yeah. But if you can manage to not have too many of those kids on a team, then you probably have a team that gets along pretty good, and whether or not they're strong or weak, I don't know, but they're at least a good unit. And that, of course, that comes from coaching too. And you mentioned too, like at 7, 8, 9, 10, you don't have leaders. You don't have maybe captains and assistants, and you don't have veterans.
Embedded leaders.
But you have who is it normally? It's normally one of two things. Your, let's call, in quotations, leaders. It's your best players, and it's your most social guys or girls as you get into like those teenage years, right? Because they're still in minor hockey, you're still playing with just one age group, but you have leaders. They come upon it probably more naturally, or sometimes they don't even know they're a leader. And so I think you have them, and they just aren't picked from a coaching staff, or they're not picked because it's their third or fourth year playing for that team.
Yeah. Well, like I think what you said was there's no vets in minor hockey, which makes
sense,
right?
You can't rely on kind of something that's already been established. Like year over year, you got to kind of teach these things kind of again and again and again.
But this is really important though, because you're 100% correct. Like the skates I've been watching the last little bit, even with my young guy, you can clearly see the leaders in the locker room, who the leaders are. Now the problem with the young kids is they're usually the best, so they're pretty athletic, they're good at hockey. They're the cool kid that the other kids want to wear, the bubble that they've got or the stick they're using. Like they've got that. But a lot of times what happens is we don't teach those kids how to lead the right way. And some of these kids they're little shits. They like to win. They play hard. They're banging their stick when they miss a shot. Like, so it's up to that coach and hopefully that parent to nip that as early as you can and teach your kid how to be a good leader. Yeah, you can get mad when you miss a shot. Yeah, you can get upset when you lose a game. That's okay. It's part of being competitive. But teaching these kids how to be good leaders is massive. And I don't think we do a good enough job just in general with our own children or as a coach of teaching all the kids how to be leaders, not just one, but all of them how to be leaders. And not everyone's going to be everyone's going to be a leader at some point in their life in certain situations, whether it's through, marriage or kids or whatever, but teaching them how to be good leaders. And you know what I mean? And I think that's really, really important, especially for those kids that are the best players. They might be the best players their entire life. So they're going to be looked at all the time, We were, my little guy's 7 or 8, and somebody said something to him, like we missed a game or something. And then one of the boys said, yeah, well, we didn't even really need you or something like that. Whatever, like not a big deal. Didn't think anything of it, but it really hit home with him. Like, he's like, man, they don't even need me. I'm not even that good, whatever. I'm like, buddy, I said, if you can't take a little bit of criticism like that or nabs at you right now, I said, do you know what, and no idea, right? I'm like, do you know what it's going to be like when you're 13, 14, 15? He's like, no, guys are going to say you suck. They're going to say you're fat. They're going to say your teeth are ugly. Like, and then he looks at me like, really? I'm like, yeah. And worse than that. Yeah. Like, and you guys think back on when we played, and even now it still goes on. But man, like, you're trying to get in guys' heads. And if you don't understand that or understand how to deal with that, I'm not saying an 8-year-old or 7 or 6-year-old needs to like know how to deal with that, but it's going to start. It starts early, right?
And are you talking about like other teams saying that?
Well, I was telling him other teams. This is a guy on his own team. Just joking.
That's my point. Like, I think right away my mind went to like, oh yeah, you're going to try to get someone off their game as you get older on the other team. Well, no. How many stories are we hearing about in the dressing room? Guys are cutting each other up. Yeah. Come back to the bench after missing a breakaway. You got guys on your own team. Now you got social media. Yeah. You know what I mean? You put up video and people on your own team are attacking you in the comments or, at young ages. Yeah. So I agree with you. Teaching habits we talked about, but teaching this mental toughness and like, hey, it's okay. Like, it's not right, but yeah, you're going to tough it out. They didn't mean it, or they didn't know what they were saying, or yeah, they're not nice. Yeah. So we're going to ignore what they had to say. Like that's really important.
Yeah, no, totally. And to me, that's the start of this whole thing, right? It's like, how can you help them overcome this? How can you help them deal with this a little bit? And, they're young minds. They don't get it. They're not, but man, like it starts at young ages. And Wade, you kind of went through probably the tail end of when you were playing with like a lot more social media, a lot more things like that. Did you experience any like stuff like this online or hear stories about guys and girls kind of going at it online?
Yeah, like so going back to our major midget year, we had I had one teammate going back and forth with a guy on the other team. We were in the finals against Waterloo, and they were going back chirping each other on Twitter. And this was like, Twitter was the wild, wild west. We didn't have any social media talk at the beginning of the season. Right. I think they had to bring people in actually to kind of get it to calm down. It wasn't too vulgar or like egregious or anything, but it really shouldn't have been happening. Like it was pretty, I hate saying unprofessional because we were just kids. We weren't professional athletes or anything, but it was, we should have been focused on winning, but it was like, that's how heated it got. So where did our minds turn? It was like, let's go chirp this guy on Twitter. And so all the boys put their masterminds, come up with the best tweet and send it off. And then away we went. So it's everywhere. And then you see like these comments on people's Instagrams and stuff. Like it's everywhere. And then you hear professional athletes like have burner accounts to defend themselves. Like it's everywhere. Like I don't think people understand like the scope that social media has kind of just trickled into all these things kind of quietly, right? Because it's not very overt. We're not looking at it all the time, but we're looking at it most of the time. And it's crazy to me. Like I was reading an article about a professional athlete that it was, kind of pseudo investigation by some people, but they basically found that it was him just in a different account. Every tweet, he was just searching his name and just defending everything in this tweet. And it was throwaway 67482 was his account. He was an ag on Twitter, but it's crazy. Like they need to be parents, kids need to be educated on just not staying away from it, but what is appropriate usage of it. And it's kind of like, I don't know, do they still do VIP in schools about drugs and drug prevention? Like it needs to be a part of that. Like how do you navigate social media and how do you protect yourself and put yourself out there in an appropriate way and things like that. So
yeah, I think crazy. I think it's huge. And it comes back to parents, right? And your kids are on YouTube or kids are playing video games or whatever it is, right? Like even video games, even something as simple as like young kid video game, there's messages on there. I don't know how old that person is or who that person is. You know what I mean? Like there's stuff like that if you're not monitoring or at least being aware of it. I mean, your kid, once he starts learning how to read and type, I mean, he could be having full-on conversations with some random, who knows, right? Or somebody that's chirping them and beaking them or whatever, right? And and then YouTube's another one too. Like you can go down rabbit holes. We all know this, right? You start off looking at hockey highlights, and then next thing you know, you're watching someone get handcuffed and put in jail for drinking. You know, it's like, why? Like, how did I get here? And so you got to really be careful and monitor what your kids are doing for sure. And, what is appropriate, what is not appropriate. I think it's huge, man, for sure.
Have you had ever, like, obviously I've got a young guy and Wado, we're not there yet, but like, have you had any like eye-opening moments, like you and as parents, like where they came home from school or something happened on the bus or something was said to them or hockey or dance or not, wherever, anything that was just like, man, how do I deal with this mental side where you know what I mean? Or,
I mean, I think
anything crazy that pops off to you.
Well, there's a couple little incidents that have happened. Like even just the other day, Maddox said, we were talking about bullying or something, and he's like, "Well, I get bullied at school." I'm like, "You do?" I'm like, well, the guys always make fun of my hair. Now he's grown his hair out; it's like long, whatever. But they'll put toques on their head and say, "No, look at Maddox's crazy hair." Like, dude, it's not bullying, man. Like, suck it up, So I didn't say like that, but I was talking. I'm like, it's not bullying. They're your buddies. They're making fun of your hair. I said, "Do you not think I get chirped on my hair on a weekly basis? Like that's like the low hanging fruit, but everyone carves me about my hair because I have no hair. I'm bald." Like he's like, kind of looking at me like a little light bulb went off, and I'm like, so obviously I think bullying is one of those terms where it's sometimes overused and it's like a big tag word and it gets thrown out a lot. And I think that to me is not bullying. That's your buddies, joking around with you a little bit. You got to learn how to like deflect that and don't take it so seriously. But I think I've said this before, but there was one time when my son was just starting school, so 4 years old. And anytime you put a 4-year-old on a bus, he was 3 when he started school just because his birthday's later, you're putting a 3-year-old on a bus. And it's a big, 2 weeks of preparation and getting ready for this. And then it's like 5 seconds and your kid's gone and the big yellow school bus is going. Like, what? But, halfway through that year, a kid on the bus would grab his hat and throw his hat and stuff. And Maddox started not wanting to go to school. He was like, so we dug into a little bit and he told us what happened. And so again, I sent an email to the school and I said, this is not bullying, but I just want to make you aware that, it's kind of this what's going on. And, if someone can look into it, that'd be great. And I talked to the bus driver as well. And within a day, it was all dealt with. The boy was talked to and it was all fine. But that was one of those moments where I'm like my first reaction was to grab my son. I told my wife this, I didn't tell my son this, but tell my son, okay, when this is happening, take your mitt off, make a fist, and you're a righty, so make sure you're on the right side of him. And then as soon as he does it, you turn and you hit him right in the nose. But just remember, you're in one now, so you either hit him again or you buckle because he's gonna come back at you, right? Yeah. But it all got squared away. But yeah, those are times when I think anyone who's gone through any time their kid gets hit, bullied, whatever you want to call it, I mean, chirped, it stings you too,
Hey, should we just disclaim that, like the disclaimer, you didn't actually do that? Just
Yeah, I didn't tell him to do that.
He's not enrolled in MMA
No.
at 8 years old now.
No, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think, it's part of life, right? And how you deal with that stuff, whether it's online. The online thing to me is crazy because people are so much braver online, right?
And I'll jump in there a little bit too, and it kind of tie back to the story about modeling and being very careful the messages you're sending your kids. My parents wouldn't know this. Maybe they'd know it, but it's not a big deal at all. Like they thought they were having a private conversation. I was like a spy as a kid, always sneaking around like up to something. So I always picked up on things that I probably shouldn't have picked up on. But I remember overhearing them how kind of like disturbed and sickened they were. So back when I was a kid, and they're still around, and this is kind of why I want to get to it with the social media and online stuff. There's forum boards that people will comment on about minor hockey. I'm not going to even give the names of the websites or anything like that because I don't want people to search them out. But it is full-on forum boards with anonymous accounts, but people using people's like initials and addressing minor hockey coaches of certain programs, and some are at higher ages and levels.
And players too, though.
It's unbelievable.
It's gross.
And they're ranking kids, and it's unbelievable. And it's like, all these parents that are probably hooting and hollering about how their kid acts online, and it's like they're sitting in a dark room doing the exact same stuff. Like it blows my mind. I still couldn't believe it when I went to search it because we've kind of talked about it off the cuff other times, and they're still around and they're still just as active, and the commentary is still just the same. But as a kid, I was 8, 9 years old, and I went on and I was trying to see if anybody I was looking for WR, if there's anybody talking smack about me. But a message there was, my parents thought they were having a private conversation, not their fault at all. I was being a snoop, but I overheard it, and if I found something about myself on there, somebody talking bad about me or whatever, and then going into the conversation we were just kind of having about online presence, like you gotta practice what you preach. It can't be do as I say, not as I do. Like you gotta live it. Like, and I know no kid probably knows what mom and dad are doing online, but it's just, I think it's important. Like, how can you look at your kid in the eye and say, well, you can't be like this online, but you just came from having a coffee at the Starbucks, just ripping a kid, 13-year-old Pee Wee AAA group.
I know.
And it's the amount of comments on it, I can't believe it.
And
Thousands of pages.
It's so gross because it's mostly parents on there.
Yeah.
I'm sure some kids get on there too, but mostly parents. And like, why are you spending time ripping on coaches and young kids? And like that is just disgusting to me. And the worst thing about online, and we've all heard this a million times, but is, would you say that to somebody's face if you saw them in the parking lot at the rink? Not a chance. But you're going to say it online where it's going to stay there forever and everyone can see it. Like I just, and if you had an issue, like we went through just a week or so ago, you got an issue with somebody, even text or email, I have a hard time sending it if I have an issue. I'd rather talk to that person either on the phone or face to face, just so I can be clear, concise on what I want to say or what's bugging me or whatever that is. It's not taken out of context. And who knows what people do with text and email now anyway. You're going to see it posted up on some social media thing, right? Like, oh, this is what Dwayne said about this. I'm like, that's not even what I meant, but who knows, right? Yep. So I think that's another piece of it too, that just being careful, man, with all that stuff. I remember when I was playing pro, my roommate was all over these message boards, like on the league we were playing in. There was comments from, it was basically gremlins, gremlins that are online doing this stuff. No offense to anyone who's writing this crap, but he's like, oh, please, you got to check this out. They're carving you. Like some fan from Pensacola was carving me, that whatever. I looked at him like, do you think I care what like some gremlin in Pensacola is saying about me right now? And I kind of like, I never even looked at it. I never looked at this thing once. He'd always look at it. But even just hearing him say that to me, it bugged me. Like, obviously, right? So as much as you want to be tough and strong about it, it's going to bug you. It's going to stick with you a little bit. You know what I mean? So we can tell our kids, don't worry about it. Just suck it up. But so you got to find a way to like really help them. It's going to take a little bit of time, but you know what I mean? Help them overcome it because I mean, that was, I don't know, 20 years ago. It still stings.
And you're a young, so basically, but at that point, like you're playing pro, like you're putting yourself out there, that a bit of that, like as much as it's wrong, it comes with the territory.
100%.
You're putting yourself out there. And it is in some cases, okay, it's a guy on the other team that doesn't like you, but it's a lot of fans. And to me, I'm like, hey, that's part of the business, like kind of sort of part of the fun. Like if you can't play through it, tough, fans yelling at you, like that stuff's, I don't know, it's different. I like it. Like it's all right. Not the online portion, but like minor hockey. Like you keep saying the word gross, like that's a great word for it.
Yeah.
Like, these kids did not sign up for this.
Yeah.
Like to be made fun of online, whether or not they know about it or they don't. Like they, like you said before, like the kid doesn't hate practice. He hates practice because he heard it in the car ride. Johnny doesn't hate Timmy, like probably, you know, and if they do have an issue, they're going to get over it really, really quick. But unless the parents keep going at each other in the car and then all of a sudden they really hate each other, like it's all starting there.
Yeah.
You know, you get older, it's a bit different, but at these young ages, like it is just absolute cancer for these kids.
No,
like,
for sure. Even just the other day, I heard two dads talking in the hall, and I was kind of just walking by, and he's like, yeah, Johnny just doesn't get along with little Timmy on the ice. Like, you know, they always have beefs. And then sure enough, you see him on the ice and they're beefing on the ice, right? If Johnny's my son, I'm like, John, if you beef with Timmy again on the ice, you're not playing. Mm-hmm. I don't mind you going hard at him. I don't mind you stealing pucks off him. I don't mind you but hit him after the whistle or chopping his legs. Like, no. You know, like it's just stuff like that, right? But I'm not blaming the dads here, but they're talking about it. So that's not the only time they're talking about it. I guarantee they're talking about it in the car or whatever, right? So just being careful about that kind of stuff and help your kid figure out how to deal with these kind of little beefs. You know what I mean? Whether it's a conversation with the other kid or, you know, it's ignoring them, just playing hard, keep playing hard against them, but stay out of the shenanigans after. You know what I mean? Like there's ways to deal with this kind of stuff, obviously, but yeah, it's so impactful, I think, as far as like how long things stick with you. You know what I mean? It's crazy. One thing though, so this is kind of the story that, and I kind of talked to you guys a little bit about it, but I'll go through it really quickly. So my little guy's, you know, plays house league, whatever, and is doing well, but he really likes hockey. And I said to you guys, you know, I'm big on just letting them have fun and enjoy it. And I haven't done a lot of extra stuff with him at all. Like he's come to a couple of our programs here, been on the ice a little bit extra, but he basically skates twice a week. That's it. But he's asked me a bunch, enough times, like, hey dad, can I get extra ice? Can I play at a higher level? And my answer to him was always like, you got to practice, buddy. If you want to be good, those kids are good. You got to practice. And then my wife comes to me. She's like, you know, you say that to him all the time, but he does put his rollerblades on a lot, and he's out, you know, outside playing tennis ball or whatever. I'm like, yeah, you're right. So long story short, we end up getting invited to this like spring team tryout for 2012, which sounds crazy. And I'm not a huge fan of spring hockey, but I understand the benefit of spring hockey. So if you maybe played in a bad league or maybe played on a bad team or didn't get a lot of ice time or had a tough coach, spring hockey is a nice little kind of change just to like play on a different group. And some of these elite teams are pretty sick. And you guys have played, I think you guys have both played where you play with some really good players or a different brand of players, which is fun, right? So I was like, I'll take him out. He wasn't trying out for the team. They were just short bodies for the last tryout. So I was like, I'll take him out. So I'm sitting there watching, and these kids are like legit. And I felt bad because I kind of put my kid like a little fish out of water. Now skill wise, like skating wise and stuff, he's naturally just a good skater. So he was fine. He could keep up speed wise and stuff, but just the way these kids thought the game and positionally how they were playing, like I was like, oh man, I felt so bad. But it was hard. It was hard to watch, right? So we finished the game or whatever. And the one thing that really bugged me about the way he played was that he wasn't aggressive but just like he's playing D, a guy would go by him and he just wouldn't take that extra step to get the puck or wouldn't catch him. And I knew he could catch him, but he wouldn't, right? So that was bugging me. So at the end we get out and the coach comes in and says, I wasn't in the locker room. I was standing in the hall and he goes in and says, hey guys, we'll send out an email on Wednesday to let everyone know who made the team. Great job out there, whatever. So my son comes out, we go in the truck and he's like, hey dad, do you think I could play on that team? And I was like, oh no. I'm like, buddy, no, like you're not good enough to play on that team. You know, like you got to, you know, I'm not saying you can't get good enough. And I wasn't rude about it. I wasn't mad or anything like that. But the way I said it, you could just see like his head kind of go down a bit and his shoulders sag, you know? And I was like, oh man. So then probably it's 7-minute car ride home. But the whole time on the car ride home, I'm just trying to like revert what I just said.
Build him back
I'm like,
up.
Shit. Yeah. Like basically I told my kid he sucked, you know what I mean? And I didn't say anything bad like that. I just said like, no, buddy, you're not good enough to play like on that team. Like those guys are good. And they practice a lot, whatever. So then we had, you know, a bit of a conversation, got home, talked to my wife about it. And I was like, and that really hit home with him though. He didn't want to talk about hockey after that. He thought he sucked. He thought I said that he sucked, you know? So that night I ended up chatting with him like before he went to bed. And I said, listen, buddy, like, I think you're really good. And, you know, you do very good at the level you play at right now. But if you want to get better, you know, mom and dad will help you. Like we'll get you on the ice a little bit more. We'll do some extra stuff and we'll help you, you know, get better at hockey or whatever. And it went well and he's been great. Like, you know, it's been fine. But it was one of those moments where I was like, oh man. And as this was happening, I'm like, you know, there are parents out there that are hard on their kids, right? And the impact it has on them, even just psychologically, right? Like it's a tough one. And we've all got that voice in our head. Like how many times have you told yourself you sucked in the last 24 hours at something? I'm an idiot. Why am I taking this extra beer? Right? Whatever it is. Why am I crushing this extra pizza? I'm an idiot. Like whatever it is, right? So like, oh man. So I was torn up about it for a while. I'm like, man, what am I gonna do here? You know? So it was a tough one, but we're skating out of this one a little bit right now, and then we'll kind of see where it goes from there. But
I think it's important that you and I know this sounds crazy, and I'm not telling parents how to parent. I'm certainly not. I'm not there yet. I'm not dealing with like real issues other than diapers and nap time. That's all I deal with right now. But like you saying, oh man, I just did this, and then you worked your way out of it. It wasn't a quick fix, but you talked to him, and then he learned, he got, you said something tough to him, and he learned how to come out of that and the reasons you said it, and you know what I mean? And you massaged it a bit, but then now he probably feels, if you would have said that night or the next morning, hey, let's go practice, he probably would have been like, no, but then you worked it with him, and you went through the process and whatever, and talked to him, and now he's like, okay, I get it. Yeah, I want to keep going. I want to do an extra session. I want to, and you can do that for him. But if you wouldn't have done that, if you just would have left him, and then a week later, be like, hey, why don't you want to go to hockey anymore? Like, it's important. Totally. And again, I know that's easy coming from me saying it as a parent who hasn't gone through this with my young guy or girl, but I think that's the most important part of that whole story is you helping him through it.
Well, no, definitely. And I think it's one of those things too, where I was really conscious on how I approach the next practice or the next game. He's only been playing in like little scrimmages or whatever, but is that next game on how I commented on how he played and talked about it after. You know what I mean? I was more, and I want my kid to know when he's not good or when he's not trying hard. And, trust me, like I don't have a problem like being very honest with them. But at young ages, I don't feel like it's appropriate to be harping on them about all the bad things they did. They're not good at hockey. No 2012, no 8-year-old is like awesome at hockey yet. They're really good for their age. Some of these kids were like, I was impressed. I was like, man, these kids are good. But they're 8. Like, I mean, they're going to make mistakes. You know what I mean? So I think it's really important on how you approach it and what kind of feedback you give and how you give that feedback. And then it was just like a complete clairvoyant moment where I was like, oh man, I probably should not have said it the way I said it, a little bit too honest. And I sometimes have that problem where I am a little too honest, but yeah, so it's one of those things where like, oh man.
But you also, like, to pump your tires a bit, you also to a fault don't always offer, you have a lot of hockey knowledge to give your son and you're, I think, so cautious about not overdoing it with them that you may go the other way sometimes, Yeah,
you're probably right. And that's something that I'm battling with a little bit, right? Is like my number one goal, and I've said this many times, is I want my son and daughter to have fun, whether it's soccer, hockey, whatever, and just have fun. And then now I'm kind of battling with that, like, okay, well, do we start doing extra? And you mentioned something, I think it was you, Kev, just in conversation a little while ago, but you said, okay, well, Dwayne, if your son liked piano, would you not buy a piano? Would you not get him lessons? Would you not which 100%.
Seek out a really good instructor.
Totally. He'd be doing private lessons, did piano. And I took piano when I was a kid. We had a piano. We went, you know what I mean? We did it once a week or twice a week. We had lessons. So 100%. But then when you look at sports and you're like, you're doing 2-3 lessons a week of soccer, you're crazy. You know what I mean? It's like, well, he loves it. He wants to go to a soccer pitch all the time. You know what I mean? So I agree.
And when you're in the business, you're also probably more.
Right. Yeah, totally. So I think and I think the big thing with me, with both my kids, is going to be, they'll drive this. You know what I mean? If they do like something, then they'll drive it, and we'll kind of wait and kind of see how it goes, and try to continue to open doors and things like that, which I probably haven't done enough of, maybe with hockey for them, but we'll see how this kind of goes as we get.
But like I said, with like the conversation, you realized right away, oh crap, got to backpedal a bit. If you open up some doors for him and your daughter or whatever, and in 6 months you're like, I'm kind of dragging them to the rink. So then you'll have the mindset to be, hey, let's back off. Perfect. Do you know what I mean? Or if they want more, you do more. And I think that's the most important part. Like, let's say a parent decides they got an 8-year-old or a 12-year-old or whatever, and they decide, hey, he loves it, she loves it, I want to do more. Just make sure you're reevaluating from time to time. Yeah. Don't get to 16 and be like, man, I've been pushing for 8 years. They hate me and they hate hockey. Like, you got to reevaluate in there, and it's okay to really love it for 2 years and then just not. They're going to change. They don't like it anymore. That sucks, because you played your whole life and you want them to keep going, but they don't want to anymore. They're in high school now and they want to do high school football and choir and everything else. So you're going to reevaluate where you're going to help them with that extra stuff. You know,
Yeah.
it may not just be the same thing at 8 as it is at 10, 12, 14. So
Yeah.
I know that you know that, and that's just important for parents to make sure they're watching.
Oh,
that.
for sure. Wait, do you ever have any kind of experiences like that? Kind of just because you're a little younger, a couple years
Yeah,
younger than
what
me.
I was going to say is I hang out with you two guys all day, so I think I'm qualified to talk about parenting. No, I obviously I like to echo what Kevy said. I think it's great that you're at least thinking that way, because I think we'd probably be surprised by the amount of parents that just aren't. And I don't even think it's like a malicious thing either. Like, life's busy, especially with right now and lots of stuff in your head, right? Like, you're thinking about all kinds of stuff right now, myself included. But I think it's good that you're kind of stopping, smelling the roses. Is what I'm doing best for my kid? And it can go both ways, right? Like, I think the biggest thing is just put the kid first, and not like the kid athlete, the kid first.
Yeah.
Whether that means doing more stuff as an athlete, as a hockey player, as a soccer player, as whatever sport they're into, whether it means doing less, whether it's choir or band practice or whatever they're into. Because like, the way I think it is, like, we could sit down and write, and we could get the Knights in on it, and Clark and Western in on it, and we can get all these coaches in. We could write what we think is the best life plan to develop a National Hockey League player. It's a crapshoot, right? We could all go back in time knowing what we all know now, go through our whole story again. Still a crapshoot whether we make it to that NHL level. Like, I sit here, I was probably more the kid that was all hockey. I didn't do too much outside of hockey, a couple of things, but it was, if I was playing soccer, it was to get better conditioning for hockey, right? And I sit here at 25 years old, and I'm looking back, and I don't blame my parents at all, because I didn't communicate any of this to them. They asked me, and they gave me opportunity. I was all hockey, but I'm sitting here like, I wish I learned how to play guitar. I wish, just involve the kid. Let them lead you a little bit. Don't get me wrong. And one thing I think you do a good job doing, always kind of coming back to, is there are certain opportunities and moments and subjects and things that you can push on a little bit when you understand your kid. And you know that they asked you last week that they want more ice. And you sit them down and you're, okay, hey buddy, we just got 7 weeks ice times. And by the 4th week, he's like, I'm a little tired today. That's where you push a little bit, because the kid's asked you for that. You set it up for him. There's a lot of other life lessons that you can tie in there. And it's okay to push, because I think it gets caught up too much one way. Like, oh, people are too hard on the kids or they're too soft on the kids. It's like it ebbs and it flows, right? It's just, but you're starting with the question of, is what I'm doing best for my kid? Not Maddox the athlete or whoever, but just my kid. So I think that's where you start. And I think if you're doing that, then you're already ways ahead of what most people are doing. So
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll see when he's 19 if he's in jail or not. We'll see. One other thing too, like, you have these moments as parents, and I'm talking about this more just because I know there are parents that are listening, or coaches that are listening to this to this stuff. But so on, like, talking about dragging your kid to the rink, right? 99% of the time, both Hal and Maddox have been awesome at just like coming to the rink. Yeah, like, excited to go play, right? But you get the odd time where they're in a mood and it's just not, I don't want to go. And they know that's going to really like piss my wife and I off, because you're on a team, you've committed to this, you're going, but the way to get us hot is by, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. So we're taking Hal to her game on Saturday, and Maddox wants to come and watch, which I'm like, okay, he can come and watch because he's part of this league, so he's allowed, whatever. I'm like, you got to wear pants. It's like 0 degrees outside, and we're going in a rink. Like, I'm going to look like a worst parent ever. So I'm like, you got to wear pants. He's like, no. I'm like, dude, you have to wear pants. If you're coming in the truck to go to the rink, you got to wear pants. No. Yeah, well, then you're not coming. He's like pushing his way out the door. I'm like, you're not coming. So he stays home. He's mad. He has jogging pants on his shoulder. I'm like, just put them on and then you can come. He's like, no. I'm like, all right. So he throws him out in the yard and runs in the house, and like, so I go to the game, come back, and then his game's an hour later. So we were having lunch and stuff, and now his game time's coming up, and he's in a good mood now. Him and my wife have been playing, and it's all good. So I'm like, hey buddy, let's go. We gotta get your gear on. No. Like, what? No, I don't want to play. I don't feel like playing. I'm like, why not? And then he gets into this whole, well, they said they didn't really need me last time. And I'm like, oh my, okay, buddy, we already talked about this. And then he's like, well, I want to play like a better league and stuff. I'm like, dude, you're on this team, man. You're committed to, like, no, you're going. So I literally had to, like, we were downstairs in the basement where his gear was. I'm like, sit down. I had to sit him down. And once I started getting him dressed, like, there's 2 ways I could go on this, right? I could just lose my mind and get him dressed. And Jenna's like, just leave him. Don't worry about it. I'm like, no, man. I walked away, and then I come back downstairs. He's not anywhere to be found. He's hiding. I'm like, oh my. So I'm losing it. I'm like, in my mind, but I'm like, I could snap, strong arm him, and get his gear on just like by pure force, throw him in the truck. Or I can just talk him through this. So that's what we did, is I started telling stories about when I was a kid, whatever. And it was all good. And then we ended up going, and he had a great time. Like, once he's there, it was awesome. But this happens rarely, but it does happen. And I want, like, nobody ever shares stories like this. You know, oh, my kid loves going to the rink. Like, once in a while he's an idiot. Once in a while he sucks. Like, you know what I mean? So it is what it is, right? But yeah, so it all ended up working out. But man, that moment, like, you know, if he was 25 years old, I would have fought him. I would have literally teed off on my son, or I would have got beat up, one of the two. But you get to that, I'm just like, I'm gonna lose my mind, you know. And I've like, so that was another like little thing, but and it happens a lot. But how do you navigate through that is the thing, because I've trust me, there's been times where he doesn't want to take a shower, and I'm like strong arming him in the shower, and like, you know what I mean. My wife is really good at like talking through stuff, so I probably learned this from her a little bit more. And I sometimes just like, no, I'm done talking. I'm not talking anymore. Like, you're going to bed right now, or you're doing this right now, you know. But I'm trying to get better at just like maybe talking it through is a little bit easier.
But you know him better than you and Jenna know him better than anyone, so you know when those times are.
Yeah, you can like, see it coming for sure.
Just put my foot down. And other times, like if you had a kind of fought him on that going to the rink thing, it might have taken twice as long, or it would have been miserable. May not have happened. You know, but at least this way you end up getting in the car in a good mood or whatever.
Totally.
And he probably learns more.
I hope
like
so.
I would think in some cases.
Yeah.
Not to say I'm probably a bit like you. Like I'm like, nope, just shut up, get in the car. Like you know, I can see that happening in a few years. But he hopefully was able to digest a little bit more that way.
And this is the thing, like you go through this, and you know, we've all been through it as kids, right? I've been that kid who didn't want to take a family picture, and I was pouting on the side, and my picture looks like I've got tears in my eyes and I'm making a cringe face. You know what I mean? Like we've all been that kid, but now when you're on the other side of it as a parent, you're like, holy man, like it's, so just like sharing ways of dealing with it, number one, is I think great, because everyone's gonna have their own like little bit of an approach to it. You know what I mean? And like you said, you know your kids best, and hopefully, and you'll be able to like figure out how to kind of navigate that water. But yeah, that was a good one.
So do you want to go back to the beginning? We say, how was your weekend?
That's right.
Go back to the very beginning. It changed your answer?
Yeah, so I tore down my ice rink. Kids don't deserve it.
You didn't want to go to hockey, so I took a sledgehammer to the rink in the backyard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that'd be perfect. One thing I wanted to touch on a little bit today too, and was just sports psychology. And the reason I want to bring this up is, you know, you can call it mental performance coaching, whatever you want to, whatever, you know, terms are out there right now. But and the reason I'm asking is because I've had this happen quite a few times where parents have approached me, or players have approached me and said, hey, like, do you know anybody that works on the mental side of the game? And there's some really good people and really good resources. There's tons out there. I've had a couple on the podcast that are really, really good. But it just came up again, and I was kind of wanted to ask you guys, what do you guys think of mental performance coaches and kind of the mental part of the game and sports psychology, things like that? I'll start with you. Well, actually, I'll start with you, Kev, because I know you're doing a little bit of the stuff in school a little bit too, so you have a bit more of a unique perspective on it, just as far as being in it a little bit right now too.
Like Kevy go and I'll show him up.
Yeah, exactly. I'll answer. And you can tell me everything that's wrong with my answer.
Well, perfect. Actually, Kevin,
and we kind of talked about this a bit, but I think to keep it short, to get to Wade.
Well, stop right there. You're already wrong.
I think obviously it's super useful, super important, and I think it can help at different ages. Even like some of the stuff that you've been talking about with, you know, going some of the stuff you've been working through, and some of the stuff we talked about earlier is in a way falls under that blanket. I think it can, but I think especially as guys get older, I think it's such a mental training thing that I just think you need the right type of kid. You need a kid that's bought into it, because there's no chance, like even with going to practice and shooting pucks, like as much as we like, you gotta practice good habits, you're still going to get better just by having a stick in your hand, just by shooting pucks. This stuff I think really needs to be actively worked on, and it's got to be, the kid's got to be bought into it. The kid, the adult, the player, whoever it is, they got to be bought into it, and they really have to work on it, not just at the rink, not just in their session, you know, that hour session that they're taking. Like it's things that you need to work on all the time, not 24/7, but that you need to think about more than just that, you know, that 1 hour session every 2 weeks or whenever you do it. I think it's super useful in more than just like, you know, your performance that season, like for life and for your career or whatever. I think it's awesome. It just really need to pay attention to what you're learning and how you're applying it to your life or your game or your season, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like in the way that I'll kind of go through it here is I'm still learning very much. Like we've only touched on this kind of in one module of my master's. It's actually the one that I've just been working on. So I just did like a project where I took a baseball player through a visualization routine. But like my big thing with it is I do think youth sports quite a bit has become over professionalized, right? Like 8-year-olds wear suits, they go to the rink and they visualize and then they go play. Like it's kind of crazy. So I think how you're implementing is very, very important. And to Kevy's point, it depends on the athlete. I do think we can maybe introduce it at a very, very like fun way at younger ages, just to get them to kind of be a little bit more normalized within sport as a whole. Like I remember visualization was just starting to kind of really pick up when I was playing. And you started to see them highlighted on TSN. I remember Mike Camilleri in the playoffs for the Montreal Canadiens. And he was sitting on the bench. He had a stick in his hands and he was working himself through whatever it was that he was imagining. So what do kids start doing in the room? I wanted to get better so bad. So I do it. And what happens? Wait,
kids are carving you.
What are you doing? Like, that's not going to make you better. Like, you suck. Like, you can close your eyes and do it all you want. Like, maybe go shoot a puck for real. So it's like, maybe if we'd been aware of it a little bit more. I just think, sport in the past was probably we were too heavy-handed, too militaristic, which I think obviously caused a lot of issues in athletes with burnout, things like that. I don't want to say we've gone softer, but we're a little bit more open-ended. We try to care about the athlete and their kind of mental health a little bit more. But I still think we can be teaching them things like you said yourself, like if you've committed to something, committing to it, that effort, pulling your bootstraps up, like that's a mental skill. Like that's mental toughness of days that you don't want to go to the rink, still going to the rink. It's heavy in snow. It just got pounded by snow. You still go to the rink. Like I think we can teach it in a way where you're not even teaching mental skills. Like you're not sitting down with a sports psychologist on a couch with your eyes closed, staring up at the ceiling, talking about how hard your dad is on you. Like I don't think it needs to be, kind of that picturesque kind of situation, but just teaching kids to be resilient, teaching them, conflict resolution, like how to kind of work through conflict with their teammates when they're on the bench, self-talk, like being positive. One of the cool exercises we did was you had to pick a partner in a Zoom call, sit down and think of 3 chirps to chirp them with. And then the question was, would you ever, how did that make you feel saying that to somebody else? Not very good. I was a little uncomfortable. I don't want to tell you you're not good at stick handling or whatever, but it's like, that's all you're telling yourself in mid-performance. So I do think there's a ton of value if we can teach kids kind of, especially at younger ages, just little kind of subtle things like, hey, don't, when you see a kid, there's a couple kids that are a little bit older in high school, they're swearing all the time after they miss a shot. Like, what are you going to think about the next time you come down? How bad the last one was? And then you're just building up these bad reps in your head. Like, I think we can kind of nip that in the bud a little bit more, but I don't think it needs at the youth level to be like you're going to see a consultant. Right. If anything, I think the associations should be reaching out to consultants and running like little clinics for the parents, and then maybe running like the team building or the goal setting or whatever sessions for the coaches, because they have a little bit more wherewithal on how to really integrate that process. But I don't think it needs to be like an accessory more. It should be something that's really integrated into the resources that are already at their disposal, I would say.
Yeah, no, I think, even parents to sit in on a couple of mental performance, seminars, talks, whatever you want to call it. I think that would be super helpful for sure. And I think you're right. And there's so many different ways to, and I'm by no means a professional in this area or have any real good insight in this area, but there's so many different ways to teach mental health and mental toughness and all that stuff. You know what I mean? There's the kind of the textbook way, obviously, and, the big terms, big terminology. But to your point, like, get your kids to do the beep test and, get them to beat their last level. Get them to show them how to work hard. Right? Show them how to work as a team. Like all that, I agree. I think there's a lot of different ways to do it. And at young ages, I think it is important to not, to make it fun. You know what I mean? To make it enjoyable. And sometimes just sliding it in there, they don't even know that's what's going on or that's your goal, But I think, that's
that motivation talk that we did with the academy and that we're going to do with ASAD. Like, I think every parent should just be aware of that. They don't need to know it and understand it and be able to teach it and continuously like reciprocate it for their kid, but just understanding that, if all you're ever doing is externally motivating your kid when they're 16 years old and they move away to go play and you can't externally motivate them because you got to stay at home and do your job and you can't travel, like that kid's going to be completely on their own, and everything that you've kind of set them up with isn't going to be useful for them anymore. And learning, like, how do they intrinsically motivate themselves? How do they stop the bad self-talk, right? Like, how do they reframe themselves after a bad performance? Just understanding those things, I think, would be crucial. They don't need to teach them or to be experts in them, but I think just awareness of it is huge.
It is kind of crazy though. You think about, like, I moved away from home at 17, 18 to play, and we never talked about any of this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? You just
Go. Good luck.
yeah, basically, right? Like I'm sure there was a lot of great messages I received from my parents, but I don't remember ever like sitting down and having these kind of conversations about, hey, you're gonna be homesick, buddy. Like it's it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be kind of prepping me for what's gonna come. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's important too. Like giving them a little bit of prep, and like you said, like that intrinsic and external, like being able to be self motivated is huge. Being able to have that voice in your head tell you, we got to get up at 5 tomorrow. We got to go for a run, or we got to go work out, or whatever. Like having that self motivation and that process of knowing how to do that, I think is massive. But then also helping prepare your kids for what is coming next, and hopefully they'll be able to deal with it a little bit better if they kind of have an idea what's coming. And I'm not saying you're trying to pave a way for them or you're trying to make it all easier. You're just giving them a heads up. And I mean, we do it for ourselves now. If you're driving somewhere, like, take Highway 3, Highway 4 is blocked off or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, same idea. Like, just, man, make it a little bit easier. Make it a little bit more, okay, I know what to expect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's, because I don't remember having any of those conversations.
I didn't move away, no, but.
No.
Yeah, I always look at it as like this stuff that I wish I knew. I don't look back with any regrets or hindsight bias or anything, but it's just like as a coach and somebody who loves the sport still, like I just try to learn stuff so that I can give kids tools that maybe I didn't have as a kid. So, but I think, like, and there's nuance to it too, right? Like you don't want to also, when you're sending them away, like, oh, if you need anything, call me. And then it's, they're calling you about like the little things that you have taught them before, right? Like there's that fine line, but I think it's important that people are just, again, it comes back to putting the person first and having their best interests in mind.
No, definitely.
I agree. I think it's a fine line because you also, like, as a whole, like, just, if we take it kind of as a big group, like, kids were probably a little bit mentally stronger when we were kids. When you were kids, like, you didn't get any help, but you also weren't, you weren't soft.
Yeah.
You weren't calling home. You were figuring out when something hit you, whether it was like someone at school or a coach or someone on your team, like hit you with something, mentally, whether you're not getting played, you got sat, someone at school is being rude to you because you're still in high school. Like you dealt with it. You might have asked your parents for help or some advice or whatever, but you dealt with it. And I think sometimes now there's, how do people deal with stuff now? Like we said, they might jump online right away. Yeah. And like write comments instead of dealing with it head to head or, you know what I mean? Face to face, whatever. So I think it's a fine line between, yes, I think you're arming kids to be able to deal with stuff, but without, without the risk of like maybe making them too soft.
Yeah.
So.
No, for sure.
Maybe that might be an insensitive thing to say.
Well, no, but I think
like
that's
I
the
grew
goal,
up,
right?
like I'm 25. I remember very well, like I do not think as a kid, my generation was as tough as Dwayne probably was as a kid, or your generation was as a kid. Like, it's just you're a product of your environment. Like, I had more resources. I had more things at my disposal. Like, I wish, I don't know if I wish, but like, I wonder what it would be like if I grew up in a different location, or if I had less resources, or if I only had one rink and I had to walk there every day. Like, I don't know. Like, I can't just recreate a whole scenario, but there's different things for every kind of situation. And our generation's going to have things that we're probably better at than yours. We're going to have things that we're not as good at than yours. Like, I can't build anything. I don't know how to build anything with my hands. You guys can build anything that you guys put your minds to, but it's just, my generation, we didn't do a ton of that growing up, and I wasn't raised that way with my parents. I'm very good with tech stuff. Like, it's just everybody's situation, environment's different. I think just providing filling in those gaps for your kids is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Like, if you have a coaching staff that is teaching those mental skills, you probably don't need to push your kid as much. You need to maybe be a little bit more kind of, hey, you're doing great. Like, it's that yin and that yang, right? Like, just kind of balancing everything out. So,
no, definitely.
I don't have kids, so I don't know.
Yeah, smart guy over there. All right, I'm gonna leave it with this. So, we're getting to the holidays obviously right now, and I know you guys have probably already done all your Christmas shopping. No, what was the best Christmas gift that you received? I was thinking about this today, and I was gonna ask you guys this today, but what's the best Christmas gift that you received? Doesn't have to be hockey related; it could be whatever, but something that kind of stands out in your mind. And you're like, man, that was a sick.
You asked us this last year, so I'm trying to make sure that I don't give the same one. So I'll go with a different one. I got an N64 when I was a kid, me and my brother, and this was like our first console. Like, that was that age we're at, and it was Super Smash Bros on it, and it changed my life.
How
I'm racing
because
F1
now,
so.
what are you using right now?
I have a PlayStation 4, not a 5. Can't find one. If you got one, hook me up.
And what's the big difference between a 4 and a 5? Is it just the upgraded version, or is
Yeah, performance. I guess something about I don't really know. I've been out of the loop more than I would have been when I was younger. But the controller, I guess, has quite some cool features to it. And then performance, like they're almost more like computers than they've ever been. So it's faster and.
at what age did you get your first console? Like how old were you roughly? Do you remember?
I probably would have been about 5 or 6 then. It was more for my brother at that age. Like I sat and watched him play, and it kind of makes total sense why I coach now, because I would have just been a backseat gamer. Like, no, do this, no, do that. Like, do as I say, not as I do. But it would have been more for him at about the age of 8, and then I was just kind of piggybacking Big Brother at 5 years old. So, but it was like the big thing, and we played. I don't even know how many hours we would have put in. My brother still has it actually.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And what about you, Kevy?
Same thing. I forgot he did ask us this, and I was that whole time thinking about what my answer was, and I do not know what I answered last year.
I gave hockey ones last year, so I tried to pick something different.
I'm gonna go a different route. So, and I may have answered this, I don't know, but my mom always took care of that stuff. Like she was just the person that did that. And my dad, I remember every year my dad always had one specific gift that he went and got for all of us kids. You know, there was 4 of us, and I remember and I feel bad saying this. I hope my mom's not hearing this, but like I was most excited to get that gift every time for me, because I'm sure for my sisters it was harder. He'd like ask my mom, but for me it was always easy for him. I needed a golf club, I needed a hockey stick, I needed a whatever, the new NHL game for my system, whatever. So I always knew that thing was going to be something sports, probably hockey. So I was always most excited about that gift, the one that was coming like specifically from him. So that just that one every year, I can remember being so pumped about it.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
we always got spoiled, so that we got a lot, a ton of stuff, and my mom probably went out and got that one too. But but yeah, I remember that one.
Oh, that's cool. Mine, I think, was I remember getting remember those GT snow racers?
Mm-hmm.
So that was one. My brother and I each got one. That was pretty sick. 'Cause we used to pull them behind our skidoo and stuff like that. And from Sudbury, so there's not really any rules up there, so it was great.
Back then, no.
And then I remember when I got my first net, so it would have probably been like 9 or 10, and that was cool. Like that was your first kind of like when it comes like at Christmas, it's like in front of the tree, whatever. It was cool. Those were probably the two that probably I remember the most and probably the most excited about. But yeah, it was good. So now with kids, now we're reliving these things too, trying to get as of right now, it's been a lot of like Legos and books and toys and stuff, but as I get older and more into things, it's going to be kind of fun.
You're getting to an age where you're going to start being like excited about some of the gifts they get.
Yeah.
Oh man, I'm going to spend so much time on that. We're going to spend so much time playing with them on that.
Yeah, we were out there using the Nerf guns that you got the kids the one time, remember?
Oh yeah,
we were
that's
in your
right.
backyard shooting them. We used them more than them.
Yeah. That's right.
That's good.
Well, thanks a lot, boys. It was good. And we'll be doing this again. We'll check in and see how things are going in the minor hockey loops and circles. But yeah, enjoy the day.
When they finally cancel the season, we'll come back and do this again.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thanks, buddy.
Happy holidays, everybody.
To kind of raise that bar.
That extra gear, the first 3 steps,
Huge strides in the performance.
that I might not be the player I am today.